In section 2.1, when we were talking about the average employee's expectations of an employer, right at the top of the list was a good wage. And I did refer to an average wage being 100% and maybe 7% more, 107% being a good wage. And I mentioned something about a premium wage for a job niche. And this all is touching on sort of labor markets and where do wages come from and who sets them. And I thought that if we are going to successfully create premium productivity in our company that's going to afford premium wages and turn jobs into careers, we're going to have to understand the ABCs of free market capitalism. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time in this section just talking about where do wages come from. And I'm going to start with sort of a build slide that we're going to look at. And in this slide, you're going to see, first of all, a bell-shaped curve. Now, if we did a quick survey of wages in town, wherever you are, for pick a job, inside sales, accounting, clerical position, you could talk amongst yourselves, you could look at the newspapers, you could talk to a few friends, you could talk to some people who are in the job search business, and pretty quickly you can get a feel that, well, you know, for this kind of job, an average wage seems to be X, and let's call it a 100. And once in a blue moon, you're going to find somebody that pays, you know, 20, 30% less than that, or maybe FedEx UPS pays 150% of the going wage for drivers, you know, for local delivery in the town. But you're going to find a big pileup of employers. Most, I'd say 2/3 of all employers are going to pay within plus or minus 15% of whatever the average wage is for that job niche. There's no conspiracy doing this. There are just zillions of different, and this gets to the next point, there are lots of different sellers and buyers of labor. You know, think of all the different employers in a given metro area, and they're all trying to buy, you know, labor, and all the employees are the sellers of the labor. And everybody can look at the want ads and go look for jobs all the time to try to find out what they think is best. And this huge dynamic auction, in a sense, creates a pattern or a zone for a given job niche. And the zone can shift a little bit depending on what the economic cycle is. For example, if the economy tanks and everybody's laying people off, the sellers, you, don't look for other jobs as aggressively, or maybe, you know, some of you don't try to hold the employer up as much as you can to try to get the, you know, more wages that you can. Or you could have a particular type of job, software, for example, where they could outsource the job to India, where people will work, you know, for long hours at much lower pay doing software coding. Surprisingly, a lot of jobs are so tied up in processes and lots of other people being nearby that they're not exportable. I can't, you know, barbers have to be here to do the hair, and drivers have to be here locally to deliver the goods and so forth. So there are things that can influence the supply a little bit, but the main thing is just lots of sellers and buyers trying to create a job niche. Now, if you had a big, long continuum, you know, a line where you said, okay, what's the lowest paying job you can think of, all the way up to Alex Rodriguez making $25 million a year as a baseball player, and realize each one of these jobs, brain surgeons, pastry chefs, warehouse managers, etc., is a little bit of a zone. And, you know, some are way out there and some are at the low end of the spectrum. How do you get into a higher paying job niche? And the question is, well, you know, or the point is you have to pay the entry cost to get into that job niche. For example, if you want to be a sports star, you have to have God-given talents, and you've got to work like crazy to try to develop them, to try to make it. And very few people do. We're really kind of looking in the newspaper at freaks that, you know, just won a lottery in a sense. Statistically, people who try to get those jobs don't. If you wanted to be a brain surgeon, for example, the entry costs are a lot of education. You don't just have to get out of high school. You got to get out of a good college. You got to get into and out of a good medical school. You got to do your intern residency. Maybe it's 35 years old before you start to actually make real money. And you had many years where you didn't have a job, so you gave up wage earnings, and instead you were borrowing enormous amounts, hundreds of thousands of dollars, to go to college and graduate school. So all those things suggest there's going to be a much lower supply of people who qualify for the job niche, and they're going to charge a high price to get a good return on the huge investment they've made. If the government said, sorry, nobody can make more than $100,000, we're going to tax the rest away, there'd be no brain surgeons, because who would want to make all those sacrifices to get a job niche where you can't make enough money to justify the huge upfront sacrifices and expenses? There are other pluses and minuses around a particular job that will increase the wages up or down. For example, you take the exact same job at a big factory that has 3 shifts, you'll find the first shift does not pay as much per hour as the second shift, which doesn't get as much as the graveyard shift. And again, it's supply and demand. You know, who wants to work the graveyard shift? Far fewer people. So you have to raise the wage high enough that enough people say, all right, I'll sell my soul, in a sense, to work that graveyard shift. Another thing is piece rate options. Sometimes jobs are very solo Suzuki. You know, it's just you and the Kabanko machine. You know, I once saw a cannery where people were snipping heads and tails off sardines, and they were all working like crazy. You couldn't believe how fast these people were doing it, cutting their things. But they were all on piece rate. They were not dependent on other people to give them stuff on a timely basis, or they didn't have to be flexible and do lots of different jobs to make certain service phenomenon happen. So if in theory a business is such that you can have somebody who does just one thing, and you can really measure that exactly and tie piece rate to it, then in theory some guys can make quite a bit more than others, depending just on how fast they work and how error-free they are. And then a last, and probably a most important but most hidden factor, is the inherent productivity or efficiency of the ecosystem, the business ecosystem you're part of. On a national basis, the average worker in the United States makes 6 times what their counterpart would make in Mexico. Now, it isn't because we're working 6 times harder, and in a lot of cases, we're not even working 6 times smarter. But we are in an environment where everything works. We have great roads, we have great electricity systems, we've got great computers, we've got great everything that's grown up over a couple hundred years, and how that grew up so successfully in third world countries, why it didn't, those are topics for another day. Just be glad we're Americans and we enjoy this incredible productivity that sort of takes care of us all. But how could we take that and apply it to our company? Because our company has an ecosystem. And if we have the right underlying rules and assumptions, and we work with the right customers and suppliers in new, smarter ways, we can increase the overall productivity or the inherent efficiency of our ecosystem, which will feed us all. So we can make premium wages, not working harder, certainly working smarter, but not just at an individual level, but in a group and a total company alignment way. And that's what we really want to focus on. Now, when you look at the global free market system, and you think, well, how many jobs are out there? I mean, there are drug pushers, and there are all kinds of people. There are people that recycle the needles, you know, for the drug pushers. So there are millions of jobs out there, and you think, where do these jobs come from? Who invented them? Well, you know, there's a need. Somebody steps up and says, I'll fill the need, you know, and try to get paid what I can. A supply and demand takes over. And the simple underlying rule is people pick a thing that they think they can do. They focus and do it over and over and over again until they can do it almost with their eyes closed, and they do it so efficiently and so error-free that they create more of what they're doing than they need themselves. To make it simple, you go back to the beginning of barter economy, and I make canoes and you hunt bears. I've got extra canoes, and you could try to make your own canoe, but it would take you 10 times longer and it would leak. So you're better just to keep doing bears, and I'm just going to do canoes. We have excess of surplus of what we do, so we decide to trade. And we haggle. But at some point, if we agree to do a deal, we both think we won. So free trade means both guys got a better deal. 2 adults are trading surplus, and that's why they did the deal. So in a sense, free trade on a global marketplace is a free lunch. It creates productivity or wealth. But it's that simple, you know, barter concept where you then put money in there as a means of facilitating exchange, and that simple rule has created this global free market system. So what's important now is to realize that free market capitalism is out there, and we've got to deal with it. So the punchline of this module is this. The free market system is out there, and it's a powerful self-organizing force. There's nobody in charge of it. But if we understand how it works and what the rules of the game are, then we can play to win the game and do it better. So that's what we're going to do, and that's going to be a main theme of the rest of this video, is how do we create that high-performance company ecosystem that's going to support premium wages from a happy byproduct of premium productivity.